Speaker.
Okay, so brief comments there from House Democratic leadership. You might have recognized one of our friends there in the shot. A reporter at the Washington Examiner, Cami Mondeaux, she joins us. Cami, good to see you. Wow, what a day on Capitol Hill. Before we get into my questioning here, we did just get a statement in from White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre on all of this. I'm going to read it here. It goes as follows. Republicans need to stop playing politics with this bipartisan agreement, or they will hurt hardworking Americans and create instability across the country. President-elect Trump and Vice President-elect Vance ordered Republicans to shut down the government, and they are threatening to do just that, while undermining communities recovering from disasters, farmers and ranchers, and community health centers. Triggering a damaging government shutdown would hurt families who are gathering to meet with their loved ones and endanger the basic services Americans, from veterans to Social Security recipients, rely on. A deal is a deal. Republicans should keep their word here. So I guess, Cami, I have to ask, when Speaker Johnson put out the legislative text known as the continuing resolution yesterday, it almost was 1,500 pages here, didn't he know he was going to get opposition about it? Because a lot of add-ons and pay-fors were included in it here. So in hindsight, shouldn't he have known he was going to face so many of these hurdles? Now the CR is not operative. It's not on the table.
Right. It seemed like yesterday. So before the text was released yesterday evening, Republicans met in a closed-door meeting that morning. And so during that meeting, Johnson was kind of walking through some of what was going to be in that CR. He was acknowledging that there was a lot of spending that was in there, but he was outlining what he considered, Republican wins, Republican policies that they could, still campaign on and say that they got over Democrats. That really didn't go well with a lot of the House Republicans in that meeting, across the ideological spectrum. I talked to some who were in the Freedom Caucus who are usually against CRs. They were against it. But there are even some moderate Republicans who were saying, there was just too much included that they couldn't get on board. So even when it was released yesterday evening, I think Johnson considered, that there still be enough Democratic support that could, push it across the finish line. But this morning, I think it just really started to pick up steam when you saw Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy come out against it. There were two close Trump allies. Those are the ones who are going to be heading up DOGE efforts in the next administration. And so I think once that came out, I think Republicans were feeling a little more confident that they could say, we're not voting for this under any circumstances. And the numbers just really started to dwindle from there.
So I want to put up this tweet from Elon Musk. He says this bill should not pass. He was, quote, tweeting the same sentiment from Vivek Ramaswamy. Of course, they are the two who now head up this new entity, the Department of Government Efficiency here. But I want to ask, who's in charge here? Because Musk and Ramaswamy and other House Republicans came out, way before Trump and Vance did in opposition to the CR, ultimately forcing Trump's hand to tank the bill altogether. And, a lot of Democrats are having fun with this, trolling that, actually Elon Musk is in charge, that he's president. Is that sentiment widespread on Capitol Hill?
Right. It was notable throughout the day that Trump took so long to weigh in on this. There were talks of, has he already seen it? Was he talking to Johnson behind closed doors? Because, Johnson was avoiding the press for most of today. But then, we saw Senator Josh Hawley tell reporters earlier that he had said that when he talked to Trump, Trump kind of indicated he wasn't involved in the talks, and so he got really upset with the CR. But there's a lot of, talk among Democrats who are now saying, Johnson either has to get a spine, that's the word that, Jim McGovern on the Rules Committee and the Minority Leader Jeffries, that's kind of their language where they're saying, Johnson has to grow a spine, or it really is like Elon Musk or Vivek Ramaswamy or these Trump characters who aren't even really in the government yet, not really running anything, who are calling the shots seemingly.
So, Cami, the charge is that this CR included too much spending. But then almost out of nowhere, the Trump-Vance statement from today called for a debt ceiling hike to extend the debt ceiling, i.e. presumably for more spending here. Help us square that circle. Did anyone see that coming? Why is that now on the table? Why is that now being demanded? This was not part of the talks.
Right. This kind of came as a surprise to many in the press corps. I'm sure many lawmakers as well. A lot of them going into the speaker's office this afternoon when we had asked them about that statement. Many just said, oh, we haven't seen it yet. We can't comment right now. But it did come as a surprise because there hasn't been any talk or negotiations that I've been aware of or any reporters around me of, the debt ceiling being on the table. And it appears now that, as Trump and some of his allies are looking at this bill, they realize that it will cost a lot of money, even still through his administration when he starts, because the CR is expected to go until mid-March. And so I think also the sentiment is that Republicans aren't usually a fan of increasing the debt ceiling. That's always something that
Right.
Democrats are trying to pull them through. And so I think what he's trying to do is, using that as leverage, cut out everything that Democrats want in the CR and get the clean CR that Republicans want. So kind of swap out all of the Democratic measures and policies that is in the current CR, just switch that out with a debt ceiling increase. And he also wanted that to be under the Biden administration because he doesn't want, I guess, those headlines to be done under the Trump administration.
Yeah, to that point here, I want to put up this tweet you screen grabbed there, the latest Truth Social post from President-elect Trump. I'm going to read it. So he says, if Republicans try to pass a clean continuing resolution without all of the Democrat bells and whistles, that will be so destructive to our country. All it will do after January 20th is bring the mess of the debt limit into the Trump administration rather than allowing it to take place in the Biden administration. Any Republican that would be so stupid as to do this should and will be primaried. Everything should be done and fully negotiated prior to my taking office on January 20th, 2025. I mean, Cami, you and I, we were talking about the last debt ceiling battle. And one could argue that that ultimately tanked then Speaker McCarthy's speakership. He lost the gavel thereafter. But it seems like, Republicans are stuck between a rock and a hard place here. They want the Biden administration to deal with the debt limit. They don't want that fight when Trump takes office. And Trump with a very active primary threat against any Republican that goes along here. I mean, this is shaping up to be like a Shakespearean drama. Also, Elon Musk, he was saying on Twitter today that no bill, no piece of legislation should be passed in Congress until Trump takes office and the new Congress is sworn in here. But then the government in that scenario would be shut down until then, right?
Right. It's been a very confusing messaging over the last few hours. You're getting a lot of mixed messages. Like you said, Elon Musk did at one point say nothing should be passed at all. But to your point, that would shut down the government. Everything that they've been, fighting for and negotiating over the last few weeks would basically be moot at this point. But you're right. The debt ceiling does take a lot of work, takes a lot of negotiations. And honestly, as we saw when McCarthy was figuring all of that out, I think it was so difficult because, Democrats wanted it and McCarthy kind of had to balance out, getting Republicans on board who don't want to raise the debt ceiling. I guess the question is now is, will Republicans, hold their nose and vote to raise the debt ceiling if that's something that Trump is saying must be done and Trump is, threatening their position in the House? So I guess it really is just a question of, how House leaders, they're still negotiating right now, how they might fit that in, how they would get some of their most hardline Republicans on board.
So I guess as we move on to other topics here, will the government shut down on Friday night?
That is a good question. I also would love to know. So far, it's looking like a couple of lawmakers who came out of the office earlier today were saying that at earliest they could push for a clean CR vote tomorrow. Of course, that was before Trump came out with his statement saying that the debt ceiling increase has to be paired with it. So it is a question on if whether, the House can even get something through before the deadline. But then, of course, it would have to go through the Senate and the White House. And so it's looking like it's coming down to the wire.
Okay, Cami, while we have you, we got to move on to another major topic on Capitol Hill today regarding former Republican Congressman from Florida, Matt Gaetz. Earlier, this was first reported by CNN, that the House Ethics Committee secretly voted earlier this month to release its report into the conduct of Matt Gaetz before the end of this Congress. Fox News correspondent Caroline Shively has more on that. Let's listen.
After initially voting to keep a report on former Congressman Matt Gaetz a secret, House Ethics Committee members have reversed course and will release their investigation.
100%. I should have just released it.
Gaetz faced accusations of drug use, sex with an underage girl, paying for sex, and using campaign funds for personal use. But he's never been charged and claims he's been fully exonerated by the Justice Department. On Wednesday, Gaetz tweeted, "I never had sexual contact with someone under 18. Any claim that I have would be destroyed in court." He added, "It's embarrassing, though not criminal, that I probably partied, womanized, drank, and smoked more than I should have earlier in life."
Hopefully Gaetz will be given plenty of opportunity to defend anything in there that he feels isn't true.
Some House members believe the Ethics Committee shouldn't stop with Gaetz.
If they're going to release it on Matt, because he's a former member, they ought to release every dadgum report they have. And let's start watching people in both parties start wringing their hands.
Gaetz dropped his bid to be President-elect Trump's attorney general last month when it looked like senators would vote him down. But he has a new gig starting next month as a cable news host. In Washington, Caroline Shively, Fox News.
Caroline, thanks so much. So, Cami, do we know when the vote took place?
I'm not entirely sure. I'd seen reporting that it had happened during their last meeting. And so the last known meeting that they had was, I think, a week or two ago, which, again, people were staking out that meeting to see what had happened. But lawmakers coming out of that meeting refused to comment. They didn't say anything. The only statement that they had was just a simple sentence that they were still ongoing conversations about it. And so that meeting, I think it was 2 Wednesdays ago, maybe. So they must have met again after that. But it is a very tight-lipped committee. Everything that comes out of there is usually through leaks, as you've seen through different reports. And so it's not entirely clear when the vote took place. I had seen in other reports that, at least 2 Republicans had flipped their vote from no to yes.
Oh, wow.
So it's not entirely sure what might have happened that would have prompted them to do so. But it seems that something had turned the tides to have Republicans, or at least 2 of them, change their mind.
Because presumably it would have just been down partisan lines, right? You would have needed Republican votes to release the report. Is that how that goes?
Right. So the Ethics Committee is the only committee in the House that has, equal number of Democrats and Republicans. And they do that on purpose, for reports such as these. And so in every single meeting they've had so far, they've been deadlocked. I think it's 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats, and it's always deadlocked on who and how to actually release something. So in this last one, I guess Republicans had changed their mind and gave Democrats the votes they needed.
So when's the report going to be released? There's few days left. Days are numbered for this 118th Congress.
Right, and I guess it does depend, too, on when the CR can come out, because I think they had said that they would want to release it after the final votes of the session are through. And so, initially they thought that would be either Thursday or Friday. Now it's looking like, there's a Democratic whip notice that was sent out to lawmakers earlier tonight that lawmakers should plan to stay in D.C. until further notice, because, the vote schedule is just up in the air. And so I guess whenever that CR can get through and that gavel goes down, closing out the Congress, I guess that's when they could release that report.
All right, Cami Mondeaux, as always. Cami, I don't even know how you keep your head straight because of all this going on there. What are you watching for next?
Right, so I am looking for in this CR, if that debt ceiling it does get raised, because that would take out a lot of, pressure for the Trump administration and House GOP next year, because that deadline right now is looking to be like next summer. And so that would be, take a lot of pressure off. But I guess what's next is really just the speaker fight. When the House does come back on January 3rd, there's a lot of talk up here with some members starting to go back and forth on whether they want to support Mike Johnson in that fight. There's at least one. Thomas Massie said today that he would not be voting for Mike Johnson. And then there are a few names being floated around in GOP circles of other people they could tap, although no one has come out publicly to say that they would challenge him. But I think on January 3rd, when they do come back, seeing if Mike Johnson can secure that gavel once again is the next thing to watch.
I mean, we haven't heard from Speaker Johnson today. I mean, are people there on the Hill characterizing today as a really big loss for Johnson? Have people lost confidence in him after today?
It seems there is a sense where, a lot of his biggest critics, are kind of saying, we'll see what happens. There was Andy Harris, the Freedom Caucus chairman, who said he's talked to different lawmakers who are very disappointed in how the speaker has handled things. And, that's kind of the vibe that you get from a lot of lawmakers. They say they're just very disappointed in how these negotiations worked out. They aren't sure yet whether they'll support him. You see Victoria Spartz saying she's not sure. A lot of lawmakers are also attributing it to, now is just like the middle of the fire, a couple weeks from now that could calm down. But the vibe is definitely that lawmakers are disappointed in how Speaker Johnson has handled this, and how he moves forward could really determine whether he stays in his leadership position.
All right, a lot to watch for in this new Congress. Cami Mondeaux with the Washington Examiner. Cami, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, in the meantime here, I do want to just read out in full this very lengthy statement Matt Gaetz made on social media today after news broke of the vote to release the Gaetz report in the Ethics Committee. I'm going to read it here. He goes as follows. The Biden-Garland DOJ spent years reviewing allegations that I committed various crimes. I was charged with nothing, fully exonerated, not even a campaign finance violation. And the people investigating me hated me. Then the very quote-unquote witnesses DOJ deemed not credible were assembled by House Ethics to repeat their claims absent any cross-examination or challenge from me or my attorneys. I've had no chance to ever confront any accusers. I've never been charged. I've never been sued. Instead, House Ethics will reportedly post a report online that I have no opportunity to debate or rebut as a former member of the body. Gaetz says, in my single days, I often sent funds to women I dated, even some I never dated but who asked. I dated several of these women for years. He says, I never had sexual contact with someone under 18. He says any claim that I have would be destroyed in court, which is why no such claim was ever made in court. He says, my 30s were an era of working very hard and playing hard too. It's embarrassing, though not criminal, that I probably partied, womanized, drank, and smoked more than I should have earlier in life. He says, I live a different life now. He says, finally, but at least I didn't vote for CRs that F over the country there. So, some very strong words from Matt Gaetz. In the meantime here, let's take our final commercial break of the hour. When we come back, you'll be hearing from more of these House Republicans on this whole funding fight before the continuing resolution blew up. We'll have that and more in 2 minutes.